welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. We've all spent countless hours, days, months, even years perfecting our crafts. We've painted, composed, written, and sculpted to our heart's content. But there's a missing link between us and the people who would love our work. It's the ability to talk about what we do, why we do it, and why we should connect with our audience. Being able to share the passion, the stories, and the emotions behind our creations, it's how we take others on a journey, make them feel what we feel, and let them see the world through our artistic eyes. And our art isn't complete until it resonates with someone else's soul, stirs emotions, and sparks conversations. To make those connections, we've got to get out of our creative caves and engage with our audience. We're not just artists, we're people too, and we need to connect with other people who appreciate what we do. And some might say our work should speak for itself and we should remain mysterious. But in a world brimming with talent and noise, we have to stand out. We need to advocate for our work, share our creative journeys, and make our art personal. The thing is, for some of us, speaking publicly or even one-on-one can be a lot. We spend so much of our creative time alone and in our own minds that when it comes to connecting with the outside world, we get overwhelmed and we shut down. Ryan Millar is an actor and author, public speaking coach, and a communications consultant who has written a book on the art of public speaking. And he's joining us today to talk about the challenges of public speaking and how to tackle them, and also the importance of making connections and how it impacts your creativity. So Ryan, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Jennifer, thank you for having me. And when you were talking, I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And because I thought it was your introduction to the podcast at large. And then I was like, oh, no, that's right. It resonates with me because it is specifically about my topic that I care about so much, which is really about connecting with the audience, like you said. And part of that comes from being connected and in tune with yourself, and then being able to bring that fully to your endeavor and what you're doing, and putting it out there a little bit to be judged, or that's what it feels like. But really, it's about sharing the vulnerable parts of ourselves, or the important parts of ourselves, that can feel scary, but ultimately on the other side of that is where the rewards are.
Oh, for sure. And clearly, communication is a very important facet of life. Like without it, you can't learn, you can't pass ideas down. But sometimes it's just a lot for those of us with maybe social anxiety or those awkward introverted personalities that we struggle to put ourselves out there. But I am a testament to the fact that you can train yourself to be a better communicator and that you can be a better connection maker. And we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about you. Tell us about yourself and how you found yourself as a public speaking coach and communication consultant.
Well, here's how it happened. It's accidentally is one way of looking at it. But my background was as an actor and a comedian, really in the art of improvisation, and that was my love and my passion. And while I was pursuing that, I was also working in communications, content creation, for different companies. And then what's happened since then, or in the intervening years, is I've kind of fused those items, because I realized that people working in the professional sphere tend to struggle basically with stuff that for actors and improvisers and creatives and people who, like myself, who love the spotlight, I'm like, wait, how can I kind of bottle this up and share this with people? And my initial endeavor was through the world of improvisation, because I think that is, and I can go on about that, and I've actually written a book about that, but it's not published yet, but really about how the skills that we develop in improvisation and use on stage can affect our lives in so many wonderful ways. However, what I realized when I was trying to communicate that and sell workshops or invite people to hire me is that people had they had to bring those two sides together. They're like, okay, I'll do this thing that doesn't seem like it applies, and then I have to figure out how it applies. And it seemed to be, it was difficult, because I guess I had to create a market for it, because I had to create a market and then sell people on it, which is more difficult than what I ended up doing, which is realizing that one of the ways that improvisation actually really helps us is in making us more confident in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. And for a lot of people, that fear is especially found or triggered by public speaking or even speaking up in a meeting, but any kind of presentation situation. So what I did is I did that work myself of taking the skills of improvisation and putting them into or translating them into a way that they can work for being a more confident presenter. And so that was the work that I did.
I was part of a traveling performance group in college a really, really long time ago. And we didn't do improv in our shows, but we always did improv at rehearsals, and it was probably my least favorite skill because I'm not good at it. I am not good at improv. I like plans, I like outlines, I like scripts, I like predictability, right? And I know why we did it because, if somebody drops a line or, we go off the rails, you have to be able to pick it back up and make it look like it was done on purpose. Like I get why. And it is a great skill to have. But how is it something that we can work on if acting is not something that we are good at? How do we work on those improv skills, because they are useful in conversation, just being able to be like, oh, well, that conversation went a direction I wasn't expecting. How do I pull that back and get on topic, especially when we're talking about our work?
Right. Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I'm trying to think of the best way to approach it. And I think one way is to think about what is improvisation, or what is that idea of in improv. We talk about being in the moment. And I know that there's also this idea of being in flow state where the challenge and your ability to meet that challenge are just sort of jockeying for position. And you wake up and you're like, oh, have I just been doing watercolor for 3 hours? Or, have I been dancing on, and just lost track of time? And that idea of flow or being in the moment is, I think, when we're really alive and really, creating and experiencing, because we're not basically censoring ourselves or reflecting or letting our mind wander, but we're completely in the moment. And so I think what improv does is it's a practice that really helps us learn how to be in the moment in the same way, I suppose, that meditation does this in a very different way, let's say, than what meditation does or yoga. But there is a real parallel or a real connection to is like, how do we just stay present in what we're doing? And I think in conversation or, in presenting is it's easy for us to go, oh, why did I say that? Or, oh, she just looked at my lip. Do I have something on my lip? And then we start touching our lip. And then the other person is like, they're touching their lip. Are they signaling to me? And we're in this, nobody is paying attention to what you're talking about. Right. And so the idea of improvisation, or this practice of improvisation, is really not necessarily in calling out those moments, but just being really attuned to yourself and to who you're engaging with or the work that you're creating, and to the moment itself.
I agree. And I had this fantastic conversation with an older lady a couple weeks ago. She's 85 and she has lived her life, and her biggest her topic of it was communication, like how to communicate effectively. And her takeaway was we don't listen enough. We don't listen very well at all anymore. And I think that being in the moment, instead of thinking 3 steps ahead in the conversation, how can I get my point across? How can I anticipate what they're going to want to know next, and just listen to the other person? You don't have to think on your feet, but you can always, when you listen, then the answer, especially if they're asking you about your work, right? Like, who knows your work better than anybody? It's you know your work. So just listen and be present and enjoy the conversation. And oh my goodness, how much more enriched is the conversation when both people can participate at the same time?
Well, I mean, I think it's exactly that. And I think when we're presenting, it's, or this idea of presenting is like, okay, so I got to say my thing, or, and also with pitching, which, my presentation skills training and coaching often, touches on, or is, all about crafting a pitch or whatever. And it's part of that is, okay, you definitely need to know what to say. You need to have clarity around what it is you're asking for, or what it action you want the other person to take and all of these specific things. But once you have that, you need to also then be present with that person and, either find that moment or just be upfront. This is what I want to talk about. Let's do it. Or, you're in the conversation with the person and then you're like, oh, I think I should pitch, I should talk about I want to see if they want to invest in my startup or buy a painting or whatever it is. But if it's not, if you're doing too much of that thinking, then you're not there with that person and you're never going to have that moment, or you're going to have to force it. And then it's already going to feel weird and you're not going to be connected. Right.
No, absolutely. Oh my goodness. And pitching your work is a totally different ballgame than just talking about your work, because there's a sales part to the pitch that you're like, okay, I have to say everything just right. And that is one of those things that I don't do well at all. And I don't know why. I get so freaked out about, I guess because I'm not a salesperson. I am an author and I like to tell my stories. And then I'm like, oh, now I have to sell it and I don't know how to do that. And so, yeah, that's a whole different ballgame that we could get lost on for a very long time, because I know people listening, that's also something they struggle with.
Can we get lost on that just for a moment? Because
Bring it on. Yes.
Yeah. You reminded me of, I think, something that artists struggle with. And I think I do. I do. And it's this idea, I think, when we look at great artists and authors of the past, it seems like it was talent alone that made them so remarkable and, known through the ages. Shakespeare, Picasso, Jane Austen, whatever. It's like they were great at what they did, and that was recognized. Why doesn't that happen to me? You know what I mean? We're like, that's what I want too, is I don't want to have to sell stuff and I don't want to have to talk about my work, and I just want someone to pluck me out of obscurity and shower me with with money and adulation or whatever that looks, that dream sort of looks like for us. The reality is, of course, that not that we need to go all the way the other way and just be like, I'm not very good at my craft, but I'm great at talking about it, because I think we know, there are people like that who exist and they get by. But what I think we need to find as, people who care about this kind of stuff is both that devotion to the work itself and that ability to, to care about it, to do it often, to have a practice that fulfills us, and then also to challenge ourselves and to try new things completely unrelated or around the edges. And then in addition to that, beside that, is to be able to talk about our work with a passion and an authenticity. And I mean, it's tough, I think, once you bring the financial component into it and you say, okay, I need this to make my rent this month, or, this is the only chance I have to, it's like, it's do or die with this. But for those of us who kind of, operate in hopefully not at a, feast or famine or a, live or die moment, it's like, how do I stay excited about my work and then communicate that in an articulate way so that other people can get excited about my work? And then whether that's, selling copies of your book or, having people, join your Patreon or whatever it is, that, some kind of, not necessarily a business model, but, we as artists, we want people to be our, what is it? Not necessarily patrons, but our audience or our, I'm trying to steer away from saying the word consumer, but it's like, we want people to buy our stuff, right? We want people to, give us some money for the work that we create, because that's not why we create it, but that is attached to why we do it.
Oh, for sure. And I think being able to make those personal connections with somebody makes all the difference, especially when you're in the self-published world. There's just something so special about being able to have a conversation with a reader who says, hey, I've connected with your work in this way or in some way. And then they go and tell somebody else, and they go and tell somebody else. Because if you look at, like, right now, book talk is blowing up over on TikTok, because it's word of mouth and people are talking about books and people are sharing their favorite books and that kind of thing. And that's because the author has communicated their love of their work. They've produced really good work. And so you have to be able to talk about your work positively and passionately. Otherwise, it's like you eat at a restaurant and you're like, it was okay. Your friend's probably not going to go eat at that restaurant. They're just like, okay, you said it was all right. That doesn't excite me. So you have to be able to communicate. This is worth getting into.
Well, yeah, and you want your audience to do to do that as well. And you're making me think of this idea of a pyramid. I love in my book I have a different pyramid, which I use the pyramid of public speaking, and it talks about how different, at the bottom are people who don't like it, and then it kind of moves up to the people who are like incredible at it, and that's a very sharp triangle at the top of the pyramid because there's not that many, of course. But I was thinking of our ability to, how to think of our work. Maybe it's this, a way to think of our work as a pyramid, and at the bottom is all, your 10,000 hours and all that work you put into it that is great because that's, you do it because you love it, but that's nothing exciting for other people, and then there's, how your output, and that's kind of the middle chunk of the pyramid. And then at the top of the pyramid is how you talk about what lies beneath that, what lies beneath, and that is your output and the work and the care that you put into it. And if you don't have that top of your pyramid, then then people don't have an access point because there's no wedge to kind of get in. You're just like pushing books around or whatever it is, instead of being like, hey, I wrote this excellent book and I think you'd be interested, and here's why I care about it. And, and then, oh, you want to know more about why I care about it. And, you have all that backstory, but you need that pitch in a sense, or that, that clarity on what it is, how you talk about what you do, I guess, ultimately. And
yeah, definitely. But a lot of times just the idea of speaking to people can like send anxiety levels into the stratosphere, right? Like that's not always something that everybody's good at.
well, and I think, yeah, and that's where, my book came in. And that's actually, so my journey with writing this book was actually, so I had started, doing a fair amount of public speaking training. And I found, I was working as an improviser and, traveling and touring, doing comedy shows and teaching workshops. And then I had a job, for many years working for a startup and other businesses. I live in Amsterdam, and then I was downsized out of my job, and I realized that I wanted to do more of my own work. And it was like, well, what is that? I was a pyramid without a top, in a sense. And so this book was bringing together my work as a writer and an editor. So I'd written a book about improvisation and also worked as a copywriter, et cetera. And then my work improv, I'd already written a book about improv, and I was like, how do I kind of make this more not palatable, but more approachable for other people? And I was like, and do work that I like to do, which is to engage and connect with people and help them. And so what I came up with was this book about public speaking that then I started writing and became this handbook, this guidebook that helps people, become more confident, because that was ultimately became the thing. It's the thing, the confidence is, I think, what often holds people back, as you said, because it's not that they're not articulate, and it's not that their work isn't good. It's just like, why should people care? Or, why me? Or, I don't want to put my hand up and, speak out of turn, or I get up there and then the nerves kind of overwhelm me and all these things. And I was like, okay, so it's not about arrogance. It's about being able to kind of stand rooted in your power, in your passion, and speak about what matters to you in a way that touches and engages your audience. And so for me, I guess I feel like it's becoming a bit meta, but this book was for me articulating what I care about in my craft in a way that I hope, and actually from what the reviews say, resonates with my intended audience. So people then read it and they're like, oh, this has actually really helped me frame how I talk about what I do, and how I when I'm called on to speak, I can do so with more confidence.
Okay, so you could give me a few hours and be like, okay, in 2 hours you have to get on stage and give a presentation in front of 100 people. I'd be perfectly fine with that. Like that is not a problem for me, as long as I have time to get ready for it. But you put me on the spot, impromptu,
Mm,
one-on-one. Like you would rather me stay silent because it's way less awkward than if I start talking without a plan.
mm.
It's just the way my personality is. I have so many things that pop into my head and I just want to say them all. And next thing you know, I'm like, the sky is purple and you just don't know what's going to come out. So anyway, I digress. See, once again, this is what happens when I get started. And I'm not the only author that struggles with this, though. When somebody says, hey, tell me about your work, and you freeze. Okay. And so if confidence is the issue, without divulging all of the secrets that we can find in your book, but what is one strategy you would suggest having in place that we could push through that weird freeze and make that connection?
Right. So there's two things maybe that I would say. So one, I think, is people um, undervalue their physicality. And so you said you were a traveling performer in college, so all of, in the theater we talk about blocking, and of course, in ancient Greek theater they would orate, to the back of the auditorium and that kind of thing. So it's really about these technical elements. But what I see often, is people who shuffle their feet around, right, when you're presenting, and it's because we're nervous. I'm like, just stand still, and then all of that nervous energy that's leaking out of your feet comes out of your face and out of your mouth, and that's how so it's a way of rooting yourself, and then it's like, oh, that nervousness actually is, I'd like to think that it becomes it transforms itself, and it becomes a more an energy, a different type of energy that comes out of your face and out of your hands, which are used for gesturing, which is much more useful than when you're just kind of shuffling aimlessly on stage. So that's maybe the physical element, and then the content component, I would say, is really knowing what it is that you want to say. So that's a headline, let's say. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, I've got 5 things I want to say on this topic, or, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to open my mouth and see what comes out and freestyle it, or I need to go through these 10 things in order. And then you get interrupted at part 3, and then you're like, at sea without a life jacket. So I think if you have that headline that you want to say, or that everything in your content attaches to, then all you need to do is you say that headline and you're already there, and then you say something else and it relates to the headline, and then someone else speaks or asks a question. You're like, okay, great. How does that relate to the core topic, the headline, and what I want to say? So I think if you have those 2 key components, the context and the physical one, then I think you should be in a good place to make an effective presentation or talk about your work.
I think also it has to do with not comparing yourself to other people, because I know this is what happens a lot in the artist world. Whatever your art may be, people, they'll come up to me and be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, you're an author and a podcaster. Oh my gosh. And it sounds so intriguing to people, because it's not something that you don't just run into people who say I write books on a daily basis. That's just not a thing. And so they're immediately intrigued by that, and they're like, oh, they're so impressed. And I'm going, it's really not that big of a deal. It's just 2 things that I really love doing. But then I get really awkward. They're like, so tell me about that. What do you do? Like, how does that work? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm bragging about something because there are people who have bigger platforms. There are people who have written more books. There are people who have hit, award-winning seller lists and that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book, I spent a couple years and I put a couple books out. Yay, me. And, it just feels really awkward. And so I think not comparing yourself to other people and saying, this is what I've accomplished. This is me. This is coming from me. And this is what I love to do. The way you frame the conversation, the way you frame your opinion or your thoughts on something can also play a huge deal in boosting that confidence.
Yeah, that's so important. And actually, I think you identified 2 issues. And one, yeah, is comparison. Was it Theodore Roosevelt or many people I think this quote has been attributed to, but comparison is the thief of joy. And absolutely, I self-published my book back in the summer, and I could be like, well, so many other people have published other books, or yeah, any kind of sort of self degrading sort of element that I could have gone on, but instead it's like, no, don't compare it. You have to focus on what you have, and and what you're doing, and everyone's journey is different. And then the other thing, and this sort of, when you were talking about your work, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, Jennifer, I see that it's, I mean, my question to you, or the, sort of this rhetorical question is, if you don't care about your work, or you're not, trumpeting it, why should anyone else?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of well, not sort of, that is something that we have to get over, and maybe even a first hurdle, when you're like, oh yeah, I wrote this this book of poetry, but it's no big deal, who cares? And someone's like, oh, I was gonna buy it, but since you said who cares, maybe I'll spend my money on something that you do recommend. And I think the idea there is, or the way that we can flip that is to remind ourselves why we are, why we're doing what we're doing, and stuff that we don't believe in. That's, that is problematic in a sense, because it's like, oh yeah, I wrote this book because I thought it would sell well, or like, I don't really like, this kind of music that I'm creating, but it seems really popular or whatever. And that's going to be tough from start to finish, because you're not going to enjoy it researching it, you're not going to enjoy creating it, you're not going to enjoy marketing it, none of that stuff. But if you do work that you care about, then what you'd still need to get over, but should be easier, is being able to talk about it in a way that is persuasive. And because you care about it, that authenticity just needs to kind of find its way out.
And that was the word that I was about to bring up, is that, even if you're trying to be humble, even if there's, it is one thing to talk about your work and brag about it, but you can talk about your work with humility and still be authentic, be like, this was a work of love. It was a labor of intense, emotional trial and tribulation, but I made it through on the other side, and that's still exciting. That pulls people in to be like, hey, let me read what you have put into this amazing work that you're talking about, while also saying, this wasn't something that I just took lightly and did easily. There's such a difference between that humble brag and
Yeah.
authentically being humble.
Well, and it reminds me also of, you said this this woman who you spoke to, who talked about the importance of listening, right? And I think that this all comes back to listening, because if bragging is really like, oh no, okay, let me talk, I'm going to tell you all about my book and blah 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 blah, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to hear that when you're doing that. But when you're sharing of yourself, then that's something that people are interested in. And when you're more gracefully sharing the floor as well, so it's not blah blah blah, I'm going to talk about my book. It's like, hey, I'm super excited, I wrote this book, I think you would really like it, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other person might have some questions, and if they don't, then you're like, hey, so anyway, that's what I'm working on, what are you up to? And it's, being able to let go of that expectation, like, there were no trumpets and fanfare, there was no applause. It's like, no, you said your thing, the other person probably not listening, or they got something else going on, and your job now in this conversation is to listen, or is to ask them a question, so that they can they have the floor, and then you just listen to that, stay in the moment. And that's what the conversation is about now. It's not about your book. But of course, 9 times out of 10, or maybe even 10 times out of 10, if you are you share something that you care about, and you're in a conversation with a person who is worth having a conversation with, at least in that moment, they're going to want to know more about it, and you give them more, and then you find the time to move on the conversation into another topic, or shift the focus back to them.
Yes, and if you are willing to sit there and listen, even if they take the spotlight from you, if they want to talk about themselves or their work, when you sit there and listen, they're going to remember how you made them feel when you sat there and genuinely took interest in what they were saying.
Hmm.
If you're going to sit there and be like, but that's not what we were talking about, let's get back to me, they're going to remember that as well. And so they're going to either equate your name and your work with, you made them feel welcome and part of a conversation, or they're going to be like, I don't know if I really want anything to do with her work because she made me feel like this and it wasn't a positive experience.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's it, because also what are we trying to accomplish here? And I think that it is at a root about that connection. That is why, we're writing and putting our work into the world, and or whatever artistic practice that we're doing, and then we put it into the world, is because we want to connect. And then if we use our work rather thoughtlessly as a barrier, because we're just constantly blabbing about it and not listening. Oh, I didn't even notice you were crying. Anyway, let me tell you about chapter 3 when I was. It's like, no, come come on. Like this, there's a different kind of conversation that should be happening now, and your work that is really your way of wanting to connect with the world or to connect with other people is now in the way. You've got to have the wherewithal to know that you need to put that aside and then engage with the person in front of you.
For sure. And I'm just going to just say real quick that this is also life advice. This isn't just for creatives, because the way you make somebody feel in a conversation is going to determine that relationship from that point forward. So whether you're talking, it's an acquaintance or an audience member or whomever, a spouse or a sibling or a child, like how you make them feel in conversation, that will determine the mood and the setting for your relationship from that point forward. So you have to be super careful in those connections and those conversations that you're having with people. And just remember, don't put yourself first. It's good to talk about your work. It's good to talk about yourself. It's good to talk about your feelings, but also take into account that a conversation happens between more than one person.
Absolutely. And I do want to make a point, which is kind of the counterbalance, because I think we're giving a lot of credence to this idea that don't be babbling about on about your work. But I do think that there's if someone asks you how you're doing and you go, fine, how are you, and they go, fine, that conversation is just ended, and nobody knows anything about the other person, and nobody has made a connection, and nothing of really any value communications wise has happened. However, when someone asks, oh, how are you doing, and you're like, you know what, I spent all weekend, I was knitting this blanket for my my niece, and you know what, it was going great, and then and you share whatever that that story is. Now we're on a road to connection, or you're like, hey, I wrote this book, and I've been struggling with the sales, or like I'm really proud of it, or whatever. What you're doing is you're actually making an offering in terms of conversation and connection, and that's really, really important. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to say like that. So it's not just about pushing your work, and it's not just about leaving space for the other person. It is about offering up a chance for connection. And it's you put that out there, and if the other person takes it, then great, you have this chance to connect. And if they don't, then that's fine, and you move on, either in the conversation with that person or in conversation with someone else.
And it's so hard to know, because we've gotten into this, at least here in the South, like it's so easy to be like, well, how are you, how's your mom, and you're like, oh, they're fine, I'm fine, we're all fine, everybody's good, we're fine. And that's just the expected answer, and nobody's expected to actually want to hear you say anything
Right.
else. And so we've set these expectations of, do I, should I, but you don't know until you try to make that connection. If you start the conversation and you're like, I knitted this blanket and it was so amazing, you're like, oh, that's so nice. Okay, they probably don't want to hear it, they haven't asked another question about it, they're probably good on that conversation. So you do have to know who you're talking to and kind of read the room, and make sure that you're not trying to force a connection that's not going to happen, because you just frustrate everybody then.
Well, that is also that's a very valuable point. It was like, hey, how's it going? Fine. How you doing? Fine. Great. Let's get on with the job. Or like, I just wanted to say, hey, I saw Jennifer at the supermarket or whatever,
Right.
and I said hi. And it's like, okay, that's a different circumstance. And in that case, absolutely, you're just, whatever, it's you're marking time. And it's like, yeah, we'll have a conversation later. You're just like, what's up? Hey, what's up? And that's, and that's it. Do not start talking about your knitting a blanket for your niece in that circumstance. Very off-putting, not what that conversation calls for. However, there are there are those moments where you're sitting down, oh, hey,
Yes.
what's going on with you? And you're like, not much. Oh, okay. Well, then I guess this conversation's over. That's
Right.
yeah, but that is a distinct, occasion that is not the same as when you're passing someone. They're like, hey, how's it going? Good. How are you? Good. Yeah, it's warm out, huh? Yeah. Strange season. All right. See you later.
Good
That is
talk. All right.
that is all that needs to happen in that situation for sure. Good point.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just one of those things. And it's funny because I've had a very similar conversation just recently with another person that we were just talking about how, investing your emotional bandwidth or anything like that, because it is an investment when you're willing to sit there and talk about your work, and when you're wanting to talk about, maybe the effort that you put into your work and that kind of thing. There is an investment side of it where, is this person, what are they going to do with this investment? Are they going to take it and you've wasted the time and energy that you've put forth, so you kind of have to know, again, just know who you're talking to and the audience around you. I don't know, it's just funny that this conversation, maybe I need to take notes because I've had this conversation more than once in the last couple of weeks. So
Yeah, well, you mean these occasions where been speaking about your work and you're like, maybe this is not the occasion to be doing this. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, something like that. Or, we think, so it goes back to the how are you? And if the person says fine, or your answer is fine, but that's not the full answer, the reason is because usually there's a barrier there that says, I'm not willing to share. There's something that has held me back. Maybe I got burned the last time I talked about myself or my work or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to that confidence. You just have to build that confidence back up and say, you know what, maybe this person really does want to hear about XYZ, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also this idea, and I mean, we're talking about these kind of fictional circumstances, or not necessarily fictional, but hypothetical.
Yeah.
And like for example, tomorrow I'm going to be speaking at a conference here in Amsterdam called Women in Tech, the Women in Tech Regatta. I'm not a woman in tech, but I've been invited by another a speaker to join her session speaking about LinkedIn and how to present yourself more effectively on LinkedIn. And there's a couple of us who are friends and who will be speaking there. And I'm realizing that, okay, that is probably an occasion where I'm going to be pretty forward about my book. You know what I mean? Because that's something that is relevant in that sort of professional conferencing kind of setting. And why are you doing at Woman in Tech? Oh, I'm Ryan Millar, and I help people present themselves more confidently, and I wrote a book called The Confident Presenter. Okay, that makes sense. When I'm run into the neighbor at the supermarket, I'll probably be more forthcoming talking about my children, who are 4 and 7, and that might be more appropriate to the circumstance. So it's not necessarily like I'm always looking for an occasion to talk about my work, but it is, being able to kind of attune your social antennae to what is required or what makes sense in a given moment or a given circumstance, and then just offering up or not, as the case may be, what suits that situation, and or taking your best guess, really.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna, you interested in this? Ah, cool, let's chat about this. Or, oh, okay, I'm just gonna ask you about your thing, and that's enough. And then I'm gonna be like, okay, see you later. But maybe actually, what I wanted to say is that one of the things that you're doing also is you're kind of building these connections. You're strengthening these connections over time, and maybe it's in making friends or business. Having a business relationship, or someone who might be, join your mailing list, or, buy a copy of your book, or maybe it's just someone who, your kids can have a play date or whatever, but it's, or nothing, but you're like, okay, I'm just going to kind of put play a few cards in this game. I'm not going to come out and I'm not going to dump 52 on the table every time I sit down, but here's a couple of cards and I'll see how the game develops.
Right, exactly. In our pre-show communications, you mentioned that you can enhance, like we could enhance our creativity by making
Mm,
connections with others and with ourselves. And I thought that was really insightful because it's true. It's so very true. So will you speak to that? Like what your thoughts on
yeah.
that?
Well, something that is struck me recently is there's a lot of research out there that talks about how addiction and problems with addiction really relate to loneliness. And it's really has to do, it doesn't necessarily have to do with bad decisions or, childhood. And well, I'm sorry, I don't want to discount or
Right.
misrepresent the research, but the a key factor is loneliness and lack of social connection in addiction. And I think on the other side of that, we see people who are, creative and fulfilled and, fully blooming, as practitioners and as people, and they have a community around them and they have a thriving art practice. And so I think the further we can push people, towards that creativity and that that community side of things, that the better off it is for everyone, and not just for addiction, but just because it's fun and it's good for us and it makes us we laugh and we enjoy ourselves. And I think for me, improvisation, which of course is my the creative practice I'm most steeped in, is really about um yeah, it's really about connection with other people, with another person, or with the audience and with yourself. And then it's about giving yourself the space to feel more creative, and to not even feel more creative, just to remove the sensors in your head. The Muppets, the Statler and Waldorf, those guys who like sit on the in the balcony and make jokes about everything. I sometimes think of our sensors as like those two guys who are just like there to kind of tear us down as soon as we try something. As soon as like, oh, I'm supposed to just make up a play right here in front of people, but if I say something, it'll be stupid and people will laugh at me. And it's like, actually, the opposite is true. If you can get those guys um out of your head and just focus on your partner and what they're saying, and then what you do is you're starting to train yourself. You just say what that makes you think, say what that makes you feel, respond authentically in the moment. And what you're doing is kind of um building, well, in neurology, in the brain, they're called I'm trying to remember the word, but basically you're strengthening the neurotransmitters, so the neural pathways. So if you spend a lot of time learning how to take a car apart, the part of your brain that knows how to take a car apart becomes really strong. And with improvisation, it's if you are able to train yourself to just be creative and share what's on your mind, respond authentically. Oh, she said this, I'm just going to say that. And, bang, we're off and we're creating theater on stage. And then you take it off stage. For example, for me, the practice of improvisation works really well with my children because, they'll say something or they want to play a game or they're like, hey, tell me a story. And I'm like, great. Because that part of my brain is really ripped, so I'm able to kind of come up and tell a story, and they'll say something and I can weave it in and not get thrown off. And I think out in the world or out in other areas, or I'm free writing at home with no project in mind. I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna, write something, and I'm able to get into that state pretty quickly and not necessarily stay there a long time because concentration and focus is always an issue. But I can find those pockets of flow, and I honestly think my life is so much better because I can do that. And I trace that back to the practice of improvisation. And
Yes.
and I can give
Anytime. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I feel like I should get I've talked a lot about it, so I could give an exercise that might kind of help people with this.
Yes.
So there's an exercise that I don't know if it's in my book. It's in my first book, Take It Easy, but it's called What It Is. And this is a practice where you walk around a room and you point at things and you say they are. So I might, point at my wall. I'm like bookshelf, microphone, pop filter, second screen, etc. But you get people to do that actually in together. I often do this at the start of workshops, and it's very unnerving because because they're not used to this. But then the next round is not what it is what it is not. And you have to point at things, and the only thing you can't say is what it actually is. And then everything else you point, and then you keep pointing. So I would go like barbecue, cucumber salad, hamburger, hat rack, gargoyle, spare key to my bike, whatever, and just point at things. And that is really, really challenging for people because now they have that level of difficulty they were previously experiencing, which was just to point at things and say like whiteboard, backpack, that kind of thing, which felt difficult. And now they can say anything in the world. And that is very unnerving. But what I like about it is once people start doing that, and it takes a while to warm up, and then the energy of the group tends to peak and then it goes down. But once they get to that peak, people really feel, free and liberated because like, oh my God, I can do anything. And it's so hard because I'm not used to it. And then there's all of this sensory overload because all these other people are doing the same thing. And so people start laughing and they realize like, oh, I have so much possibility. And like, wait, I am quite not repressed, but like I struggle to think of things. Why is that? And then that's when we can really get into the practice of creativity. But that exercise is something that people can also do at home.
Yeah, no, that's a great exercise because it unlocks different parts of the brain too. And it does, like when you're trying to think of things that something is not, there's this discordance at play. And so when you've overcome that, you're overcoming something that has become a stumbling block for you. And you're like, oh, that's no longer a problem for me. And the same is true. Like when you're practicing a skill, I mean, you're not going to be perfect at anything the first time you try it. If you are, then don't tell me. And so, but that's why you practice. That's why you use skills, because if you don't, then you do lose them. We always talk about in psychology, we always talk about those neural pathways, like a cow walking back and forth across a field. They walk, they're creatures of habit. They form those paths along the fence line, waiting for somebody to bring them food or whatever. And the more they do it, the longer that cow lives on that farm, the deeper that trench goes. And that's true with when you do things over and over again, it makes those ridges deeper and it becomes like second nature to you. And so that's true when you're holding a conversation. And it's something that I have had to push myself to the limit sometimes because I am not a natural conversationalist when it comes down to it. Like I said, put me on a stage in front of 100 people and I'm fine, but one-on-one and I get really, really uncomfortable. And so it's a skill. The more I've done it, this is probably my 70th or 72nd, I can't remember exactly, interview that I've done with somebody. And if you look at the very first one and you look at this one, you can tell I'm much more comfortable here. You might not be able to tell, but I can tell that I'm much more comfortable in this conversation than I was at the beginning. But it's because it's something that I've done over and over again. And it has become easier to talk about my work. It's gotten easier to talk about myself and those kinds of things. So but you do have to be willing to take off that filter. And I'm not saying that you let loose every secret or, word that pops into your head. But when you live with these filters, which I was always, when I was growing up, it was always kids are best seen and not heard unless we speak to you. And then you have to say something, but it better be within these boundaries. And so like there was the expectations there were very strict. And so it's something that you have to learn to cast off and say, it's okay to talk about yourself. It's okay to talk about things that matter to you. And if they do matter to you, then by all means, they're probably going to matter to somebody else too, because you have kindred spirits out there that want to know what you care about because they care about them as well.
And that actually is the perfect, brings back to that idea of community that we were speaking of, these kindred spirits. And if you don't share your work or your passion or what you care about, you won't find your community, whether it's amateur theater enthusiasts or or football players or, whatever. I like ragtime jazz. And, I need to, so you find your community online and you're like, what do we talk about? Well, I've got to start sharing things I care about. And maybe it's on topic. And then maybe now that we have this bit of relationship, I need to share a bit more personal stuff, because actually it's not just about the thing. It's same with work, where you're like, you have work friends and you're like, yeah, we work really well on a project and I don't know anything about them. It's like, okay, that's great and that's productive, and that's perfectly functional relationship. But maybe, and not I'm not saying there is, but maybe in some cases there's a chance or an opportunity or to push beyond that and say like, hey, why don't we learn about each other's lives, which you probably wouldn't say it like that, but it's like, hey, I'm going to divulge a little bit more about myself or ask them a few questions and see how comfortable they are. And, and then you start to develop a community, and then maybe you get exposed to something else. You're like, oh, that person is, they do, they make electronic music, and that wasn't really my thing, but I'm kind of interested in, they're going to share a little bit, and then you get to exposed to new things. So you can find communities that, both tie to your own personal passion, and then you can find other communities that, and expose yourself to things that can enrich your own life and are perhaps unexpected.
Oh, for sure. Broadening those horizons. But you'll never know if you don't find that common ground or take the chance to say, hey, so I noticed, and this is the other thing. And as creatives, a lot of times we are really good about observing things. We just don't talk about them unless we're writing them or putting them into our art. But you observe the world around you a lot closer as a creative than I think the everyday average non-creative person, or, non-artist. I don't know. I want to call everybody's creative in their own right, but you know what I'm saying? Like those who make creativity part of their whole personality. Because we observe things so carefully, it's very easy to see the person next to you and be like, I have a feeling they have an interest in whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Or, you pick up on these things. And so there's no reason, clearly, if they're allowing you to pick up on these things, it's probably a topic that's safe to broach anyway. And so why not be like, hey, I saw you have a picture of hopefully your kid, in your wallet, this, whatever. And so make the connections. You just never know.
Well, and that is also related to something that is, certainly within improvisation, but I think applies to creativity in general, but is the role of intuition and, and just feeling, or, like a, idea. And in improv, we're like, there's no wrong ideas, and, whatever you say or do is, becomes fact. And, within the context of a scene, but it's also, people, I think when you hold back from that, it's like, oh, I noticed you have a picture in your wallet. That's, and then you're like, I don't want to add any personal thing. I'm just going to state, what I saw. And it's like, no. What you want to do, what will actually make this, interaction so much more engaging, is if you're like, is that your kid? Oh, you don't have kids. Oh, so is that like a niece or nephew, or like, who is that? That was you when you were a kid. Oh, that's amazing. Is that, do you think that kid would be proud of you? Oh yeah, that's cool. Why is that? Oh no. Okay, why not? And then you're kind of in this, by allowing yourself to bring your intuition, or I guess your curiosity in this case, then you're suddenly in a much deeper, more fruitful interaction on both sides, rather than just going, oh yeah, that's fell out of your wallet, and you hand it back.
Oh, that's so true. That's so good. That's such a good, just a good starting point for how to just take what you see, take what you know, take what you're feeling. Because yes, intuition for creatives is way higher. We tend to be a little more empathic. We tend to be, more sensitive to those kinds of things. And so absolutely work with the gifts that you've been given, and then connections might come just a little easier. I can't guarantee that, right? There's no money back guarantee here, but it's possible. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that, yeah, I think that practice, and that's, again, this related to improvisation, where it's like when you start giving yourself the freedom to open up, or to make assumptions or make guesses or follow your intuition or instinct, or gut feelings, and you're trying new things. I think you're leading a more interesting, a more enriched life. And therein is the value, because, your life is more, is richer. And then when you layer on top of that the impact on your creative work, it's, it's like, well, I mean, it's a real no-brainer. I feel like, where it's like, yeah, we've got to kind of give ourselves a little bit more leeway in terms of what we want and what we think we want, or what we want to try and accomplish, and also how we connect with other people. It's like, we got to put ourselves out there, try a little harder, try a little more, and because the rewards are worth it.
Absolutely. Okay, Ryan, we have made it to the part of the show where I'm no longer in control. You are now the host of the show for the next few minutes, and so we're going to flip the script.
Oh, I was so excited to be able to flip the script, and I'm so excited to be in this part of the program, because, Jennifer, my question to you is, this is what I have been thinking about is, can you tell me about your work?
Nope.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn.
Okay, so it depends on which work you're talking about. If you're talking about my books, or if you're talking about my podcast, because they are two totally different worlds.
Let's talk books. As
Okay.
fellow authors, I want to hear about your books, please.
Okay. So I have written and published two books. Well, I've written three books. I've published two books. The first two books came out. They are part of a series, and they are a romantic suspense where they both stemmed from, well, the first one stemmed from me having a dream, and I woke up from the dream and I thought, I don't really know how that ends, but I really want to know how that ends. And so I wrote the book. And of course, it doesn't look anything like the dream looked, but it was a very good starting point. And so I wrote that book, and then I wasn't finished with the characters. And I thought, I need to know what happens to my characters next. And so we hung out for a little while longer, and they got a second book. And the ones that survived the first book got a second book. And then this third book has nothing to do with the first two. It's a completely different story. And it's a contemporary romance that the story hit me. The characters always show up first, and the characters showed up when I heard a song, and it became a book. And now that book has turned into a 3-book series that's in the works, and book 2 should be finished at the end of November. So you just never know what's going to pop out of my head, but that's the current status of my work.
So the first couple of books were inspired by a dream, or that was the kickoff, and the second series of books was inspired by a song.
Yep.
Where else might you get your inspiration for future books?
Okay, so I have an entire list of book projects in the works, and a lot of them, it's really funny, a big majority have come from music, but one of the ones that I'm most excited to get to, once, if these, all the characters that I'm currently talking to, they will all be quiet for a little while. The next book that's on the docket came from a conversation I had with, he's the son of my husband's cousin. So you can do the math there. And because we're just related by marriage, but he is 18 and he has dealt with autism and Asperger's syndrome his whole life. And he has really, like, I've watched his parents just struggle to find every best possible scenario for him where he could be successful. And we had a conversation several months ago. We all sat down together just to hang out. We don't see them often. They live in Texas, we live in Alabama, and so we don't see each other often. But we got together when they were in town, and I just sat and listened to him talk, and he's got goals and he's got plans, and it's things that, I never really thought. The first time I ever met that kid, I thought, there's no way, like, he'll end up in juvie before anything else, which is a terrible thing to think, but that's just the path that it looked like he was on, because he had so many struggles. But just listening to him talk, I was like, oh my gosh. So he was my next character inspiration. So people can inspire my stories just as much as dreams and music. So yeah.
That's wow. All fascinating. And it makes me think my next question for you is, because you've got a lot on the go books wise, and of course this podcast, which I'm very happy to be on and to have a chance to meet you and chat with you. And I wonder, Jennifer, how do you relax? What do you do when you're not making cool stuff and putting it into the world?
I read a lot, a lot. I actually was talking to a little girl at church the other day, and she was like, I've read like 8 books this month. And I was like, that's fantastic. And she was like, I don't always get to read that many, but I've probably read close to like 50 books this year. And I was like, hey, that's so cool. She goes, how many books have you read? And I said, well, let me look. And I pulled up my app, and it was like 329 books this year. And I was like,
Mm,
so I
yeah,
read a lot.
yeah. Wow, that is I'm not gonna compare my list with that little girl or with you. So, but yeah, that's great. Okay, you read. That's what I wanted to know. And thank you for sharing about your work,
Oh, yeah.
especially because I was like, yeah, that's you mentioned, you're like, oh, I haven't quite figured out how to talk about it. And I was like, no, she has.
I have. I really have. Like it takes effort though. Like I had a lady, she came up to me the other day and we were talking, and she was like, it sounds like you've got a lot going, because I had written in my newsletter, I had written about all the things that I had on the docket for ideas and stories that I was working on. And she was like, how do you keep it all straight? And I was like, I don't. It's just whatever pops into
Mm,
my head is what I'm working with. And she was like, well, you just sound so busy. So tell me about this one that you're working on. And I was like, dadgummit, it wasn't one that I had worked up my elevator pitch for yet. And so I'm just like, it
uh,
depends on the situation, where, it depends on which work you want to talk
yeah.
about.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, sometimes you can get wrong footed. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that necessarily. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll back to the drawing board with that one, and then I won't get stumped by that question a second time.
Yeah, it's like, so the first 2 books was really funny. And I don't know how it works with nonfiction books. How do you come up with a blurb for the back of your book, which you're gonna tell me about in a second. But like with a fiction book, I've written this entire book with characters and plot, and it's amazing and it's wonderful. And I can't tell you what it's about. I can't summarize it to save my life to put
Mm,
it on the back of a book. But once I have, then I start reading it over and over again. And I'm like, okay, now I can tell you what my book is about.
right. Yeah, the summary is so important. And yeah, and they kind of go back and yeah, back and forth.
Yeah, what's that like for a nonfiction book? Like, because you don't want to give everything away either. You're like, I need you to buy this book.
Yeah, yeah. Just read it. Buy it and read it. Well, one example I wanna give, or something that popped into my head, is that I've done a lot of content creation online for clients, and and one of the things that I teach people when I teach them blogging is, I say, so you kind of have your topic you're gonna write about. I don't know, the 1984 Olympics, if that was an Olympic year. And then it's like, okay, and then your headline is, I'm going to write about figure skating, and you kind of come up with your headline, and then you write your article, your blog post, and then once you're done, you go back to the headline and you rewrite it. So you sort of, you know what I mean? There's like two reasons that you have that headline. One is like, okay, I kind of think this is what it's about, and I'm going to write to that. But if you're writing well, the article will kind of be informed by the headline, and then it'll take its own shape. And then normally you'll have to go back and be like, oh, this headline doesn't fit anymore. And then you write your new headline. And I think maybe the parallel with writing a book is, I think I initially called it the public speaking handbook or something, was initially the title. And then as I started writing it, I'm like, okay, no, it's more about confidence. And then, and then I had that the full title is The Confident Presenter: Ditch Your Fear of Public Speaking and Embrace the Stage. And then, it was like, okay, now I've got the book and the title, and the subtitle. And now the back, it's like, okay, I'm really just going to kind of, I want to talk. There's some bullet points that need to come out so that people know sort of what they're going to come out with in terms of, I think in fiction, it's what do what's the ride we're going on together? Tell me that. That's what I want to know. And in nonfiction, it's like, what am I going to have when I'm done? where am I going to be? And so I think maybe they're completely different in a sense, but it's like, okay, so now I've got my title, my subtitle, and and the content of the book. And so the blurb is really, this is what you're going to have at the end. This is how we're going to get there, and we're done. And then of course, I don't know if you have beta readers or anything. I have a few friends that I was like, how's this blurb sound to you? And I sent it around to a few friends, got some input, and then I was like, okay, I think that works for me.
I literally, my editor was like, okay, we need to work on the blurb. And I said, can I just pay you extra to write it for me? Like, please just write it for me. Cause it's so hard, because I don't want to spoil it, right? If I'm going to read the back of a book, I don't want to know what's going to happen. I want you to give me the highlights, just give me these high level things. But at the same time, I want you to know the book that you're getting. And so it's so hard for me. I don't know. That's one thing I haven't figured out.
Well, I think that's also there's a parallel with the movie trailer, right? Where it's like, okay, get me excited for the movie, but don't tell me everything that's in the movie. And I think there's it's a specialization in itself that, like the editor of the movie is not necessarily the person who's going to make the best trailer. And the author of the book, or the editor of the book, is not necessarily the person who's going to write the best blurb. Finding that balance between, like, I need to, take you up to the door and give you the key, and maybe even, like, you open the door so you can peek inside, but I don't want to, you don't want to give you everything. And this is what happened, and she wouldn't believe it because, she didn't know it then, but, like, her sister turned out to be an evil or whatever. You're like, no, that's too much. Rein it back in. So it's finding that balance.
Let's tell listeners how they can connect with you and your work. And then I'm going to ask you your big question.
Okay. So how to connect with me? You can connect with me online. My name is Ryan Millar, and I don't normally pronounce it that way, but it's spelled my last name Millar. And so if you're looking for Ryan Millar, how you think that's spelled, you won't find me. My website is ryanmillar.com. And the book also has its own website, which is confidentpresenter.co. So either of those places are a great place to find me, or, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. But reach out. I'd love to connect if you've got any thoughts or questions about public speaking or improv or anything that we've talked about.
Fabulous. And it'll all be in the show notes, so it won't be hard to find you, and it will all be spelled correctly. I promise.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
You are welcome. Okay, here comes your big question. You've had a lot of time to think about it. All right, you've had all this time. So the question is, what is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
So this is the key to it all. It's a journey. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is I kind of don't care about your next public speaking engagement. That's not true. I really do care. But what I want to do is sort of take that down a few levels of importance and say, what really matters is that 5 or 10 public speaking engagements from now, that you see progress. And the only way to do that is by not being hyper invested in the next thing. Now, the subsection of that is that you do need to still work really hard, but when everything is kind of make or break or do or die, it's like, oh, I did this, oh, it went amazing, I'm great, and then you don't take your learnings from that, or you say, oh, I did it and it was terrible and I'm the worst public speaker and I'll never get any good, then you're also not taking any learnings from that. It's being able to go into something, say, I worked as hard as I could, did my best. Some things went really well. Here's what didn't. I'm going to do, here's how I can fix that. And then I'm going to look for my next occasion to present. And instead of saying, okay, I hope my boss doesn't ask me again until, the next annual meeting or whatever. Instead, you keep searching out these opportunities, because you know that you're going to get better faster if you do it more often.
Yes. 100% yes. Ryan, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us and like some strategies that we can use. Is there anything else you want to leave us with today?
No, Jennifer, you know what? I think we covered it. I will just say thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy and a delight. And yeah, it's been great to have a connected conversation with you. And so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.